Welcome back to A Bit of Curiosity. I'm your host, Jeremy Howlett, coming to you from my home office here again today. No guest, but I wanted to talk about some of the things that really stood out to me in our last podcast, in our last episode with Richie Norton. I've watched Richie for years. I admire his tenacity, his ability to, I don't want to use the word work-life balance because it's such a farce, but his ability to put work second, as he terms it, right? Like, he talks a lot about in our episode, he talks a lot about the importance of putting work second, because family first isn't truly family first all the time when we claim it. Because if we're always working for our families, but we're always at work, or we're always connected, or we're always focused in on what we're doing, then we really aren't present. That's not necessarily what I want to talk about today, but I am impressed with him and his ability to put those things, set his priority, and be able to establish that. But one thing that he talks about, or that he really kind of pulled out of me, was in our conversation, he flipped the script a little bit, and he turned it back on me and challenged me a little bit. He asked me what was something that I wanted to do, what was something that I wanted to achieve. And I fired back. I said, I want to write a book. And that's something that I've been working on for a while, and I've got a couple of book ideas. I've got one that's readily in the works. I've talked about it a little bit before, and it's something that I'm spending a lot of time on. But he asked me a question. He said, okay, what's going to happen when you publish the book? And for a while, I've been thinking about that question. I answered it and said, well, I could get speaking gigs. I could get like opportunities to go and talk, podcast circuit, whatever, right? Like, there are things that could certainly happen based on writing that book. And then he said something that I thought was pretty profound. He said, well, you could do those without writing the book. And I think as I've thought a lot about that question, I think the question to be asked would be why? Why do I want to write the book, right? What is my intention? And as I think about that, I think about the way, even what would happen, right? Like, how intentional are we about our goals? We're coming up to the end of the year, right? Like, it's November, and we've got about 6 weeks left in the year. And then what are most of us going to do? We're going to make New Year's resolutions, right? We're going to say, okay, I want to go to the gym more. I want to work out more. Maybe I want to run a marathon. Maybe I want to read more books. Maybe I want to finally start that business. Maybe I want to learn to be a realtor. Maybe I want to write the book, start the blog, start the podcast, whatever it is, right? But are we being intentional about those? I spent the last few days writing down some of my goals and looking at some of the things that I'm looking and working towards. I just recently finished the book, The One Thing, written by Papasan and Gary Keller. Gary Keller is the founder of Keller Williams. And in the book, it's a lot about intentionality. It's about how important it is for us to really know and focus on what we're doing. Multitasking is a thing that has come about in the last 40 years that's been talked about a lot. And it really came up in the early days of the computer, because there wasn't really a name for what a computer could do when it was doing multiple things seemingly at the same time. And one of the things that Gary Keller points out in the book is that computers actually aren't doing multiple things at the same time. The processes are just so fast that it can move from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And that's what we refer to as multitasking. And so we as humans have taken this concept of multitasking and put ourselves in as a computer, right? Saying, oh, I can do multiple things at once, right? I can be in a meeting while I'm replying to my emails, or I can be putting together a pitch deck while I'm also listening to a podcast. And unfortunately, those things don't really work that well. It's really hard to do more than one thing really well. If we do multiple things, we do multiple things poorly. But if we do one thing, then we can do it really well. And that one thing really kind of comes down to intentionality and the importance of being intentional and knowing, okay, what am I focusing? What am I doing? And so as I as I was putting this together, as I was writing out, okay, here's my different buckets of what I'm working on, right? My podcast, writing the book, real estate investing, writing on Substack, putting together the retreat that we've pushed out there and that's coming online in January and March. These things are all buckets of what I'm working on. I'm also a father. I'm a husband, right? I've got to devote my time and my energies to those more important things. I've got to take care of my physical body, right? So as I look at these different buckets of, okay, here's where I want to spend my time, there's no way I can do all of those all at the same time. I really have to narrow down and say, okay, what's the one thing that I'm going to focus on right now? So right now, I've blocked out this bucket of time on my schedule to say, okay, I'm going to work on my podcast. So I'm recording this podcast. I'm finishing publishing a couple of other podcasts that'll come online. And I'm organizing some things along those lines. That's what I'm focused on. But right now, while I'm recording this podcast, I can't be publishing or editing another podcast episode. I can only be focused on this one thing right now. But as I'm intentional about lining these things up and saying, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's the buckets I need to play in. I added one other line, and it's kind of given me some serious thought. I added a line that was a simple question. Why? Why am I doing these things? According to each bucket, right? What's the purpose? What's the intention behind them? I found myself kind of floating a lot of times, but I've also, as I've reflected a little bit over intentionality over the last couple of months, I've found that I've been more intentional than I thought I had been in the past. And I look at the things that have gone really well for me and how intentional those were. On a podcast episode that I did with Joe Morton, he turned to me. He had listened to my episode with Spencer Taggart, where we talked a lot about intentionality. Spence is great on coaching on intentionality. But Joe asked me, he said, okay, in starting Ultra, how did intentionality benefit you? And I've thought a lot since that question, and while kind of writing some things regarding Ultra and recording those things, is when I started Ultra with Golden, it was kind of an unintentional happenstance. And I've always kind of attributed it to like, okay, it was just three dumb kids in their 20s, right? Me, Golden, and Brian, that were like, oh, we can go start a shoe company. We can do it. But as I've thought about it, there was a lot of intentionality behind it. And I think for all three of us, I think there was intentions for all three of us. We all had kind of big visions, big goals, things that we wanted to do. Golden wanted to help people run healthier, right? That was a goal that he had, and he was trying to fulfill that goal in different ways. I had set a goal leading up to that happenstance meeting with Golden that I was going to lose 29 pounds by my 29th birthday, which was coming up in 4 months from the time that we got together. And I was also passionate about starting a business. I was running a small little kind of startup agency at the time. I didn't see that as like the solution, but I wanted to start a business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So those two intentional goals were what I had. Brian at some point wanted to start a business as well. He had been managing, running in outdoor stores, but he wanted to break free and do something. We weren't sure how we were going to solve some of these problems that we were facing, but we were intentional. We had set these as goals. We knew that this is what was going to happen. And so when Alter came in play, it was kind of unintentionally fulfilling our intentions. And then as we buckled down, it became very intentional. We were very intentional about how we were going to approach it. We were very intentional about the product that we were going to produce. We were very intentional about how we were going to name the brand. We were very intentional about where we were going to spend our focus and our time. We were intentional about going retail first. We were intentional about so many other things. And that's why Ultra became successful, at least one of the key reasons why. We leaned into courage. We built and fed off of each other. We grew from each other, and we were able to lean on each other. And it was about that intention. And so going back to Richie's question, why do I want to write the book? I still don't know if I fully have an answer, but I think what I want out of the book, or why I want to write the book, is because I want to provide a book or a framework or a process to other aspiring entrepreneurs that shows how it can be done and that it can be done. And that it's not, you don't have to just be a tech company. You don't have to be experienced, right? Like, I did not know anything about running shoes before I started a running shoe company. I'm grateful that I did. I'm grateful that we got intentional about it, and we're forever blessed because we did it. So as I think about the things that I'm doing today, I'm asking myself a little bit more why. Why do I want to do this? Why do I want to spend my time on this thing? What is it going to result for me and for other people? And by being more intentional, it allows me to be able to unlock a little more of the passion behind it. And I can unleash a little more courage in doing it and going out and making it happen, especially when things get hard or when it seems like I'm just not motivated to do it. If we're not intentional about it, the motivation's going to wane, it's going to disappear, and we'll be spinning our wheels. So I challenge you, I invite you to be more intentional. Be intentional about what you're doing. Be intentional about your job. Be intentional about your family. Be intentional about life, how you serve, how you show up every day. Because intentionality is going to change your life for the better, and it's going to change those around you. Because by being more intentional, others will see it, and they will be blessed by your activities. Thank you again. Thanks for joining A Bit of Curiosity today. I hope that you subscribe, like us, leave a review, share this with a friend, and get up and show up every day. Be intentional.